They didn't know that at the top, the purpose had changed. The tower no longer pointed to God. It pointed against him. The sky was no longer a dwelling place. It was a limit to be overcome. Human creations occupied the space that was once reserved for reverence. Nimrod gazed at the horizon and spoke in a low voice. Man no longer needs to bow down. The sentence hung in the air. The tower grew. The challenge was set. And as the leaders descended in silence, carrying a secret that would change everything, an inevitable question began to weigh on history itself. But would God allow that? The question wasn't answered at the top of the tower, but the answer was already on its way. It didn't come in the form of thunder. It didn't come as a strong wind. It came from where it always was, from the sky that men had decided to defy. The Bible describes this moment with few words, but words full of weight. In Genesis 11:5, then the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the sons of men were building. God comes down, not because I was far away, not because I needed to see better, but because the time for observation had ended. The divine gaze swept across all of Babel. It saw the organized city, the crowded streets, the lit ovens, the tower growing. It saw a united people, but not in obedience. United in defiance, united against the purpose he had established since Noah. Down below, nothing seemed different. The work continued. The orders were given. The people repeated the same words. The sky remained silent. Today we've moved up another level, said a supervisor confidently. We're almost there, another replied. They didn't know that the sky had already come down. God was not impressed by the height of the tower. He did not feel threatened by the structure. What caught his attention was the heart behind it, a heart that had traded dependence for control, faith for human security, reverence for pride. Behold, the people are one, declared the Lord. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. The unity, which could have been a blessing, had become a danger. When men unite far from God, nothing limits them. Evil organizes itself. Error is strengthened. Rebellion becomes a system. Nimrod at that moment still felt in control. His leaders obeyed. The people followed. The tower advanced. To him, the silence of the sky still seemed like victory. Nothing will stop us, he said to a man nearby. There are many of us, the other replied. We are one, Nimrod concluded. But there was something they couldn't control. Divine decision. God didn't need to destroy the city with fire. He didn't need to repeat the flood. The judgment would be precise, direct, and sufficient. It would strike exactly at the root of everything. The intervention was approaching. Heaven was not absent. It was watching. Every word repeated by the people. Every order given. Every brick laid as a substitute for faith was seen. God didn't come down to negotiate. He came down to act. And while men believed they were building the future, while unity seemed indestructible, a question began to form, weighty and inevitable, about to find its answer. What will God do with a world united against him? The answer did not come as many expected. There was no fire falling from the sky. There were no walls collapsing. There were no war cries. The judgment began almost imperceptibly in the middle of an ordinary workday. The sun rose as usual. The men arrived at their posts. Orders began to be given from the top of the tower. Bring more clay, shouted a supervisor. The man below looked up confused. What? He replied, frowning. Mud? More mud? The supervisor repeated, annoyed. The worker shook his head. I don't understand what you're saying. Others began to turn around. Voices mingled. Familiar words sounded strange. Common sounds lost their meaning. Confusion spread quickly. The Bible describes this moment in Genesis 11:7. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand each other. What sustained the entire system was the unity of language, and God touched precisely that area. "Are you mocking me?" A man shouted. "I can't understand you." Another replied desperately. The order stopped working. There was no more coordination. There was no more command. Shouts overlapped. Gestures replaced words. But nothing worked. "Stop." A leader tried to shout. Nobody obeyed. Not out of rebellion, but due to misunderstanding. The work has stopped. Tools fell to the ground. Men moved away from each other. Small groups began to form, brought together only by those who still spoke the same language. Chaos took over the plain. Nimrod hurried down when he realized something was wrong. He tried to speak to his leaders, but received only blank stares. "Gather the people," he ordered. They stared at him, speechless. "Talk to me," he insisted. Nothing. The empire began to crumble right there without a sword, without an enemy army, without organized resistance. The loss of communication was all it took for everything to collapse. The unity built outside of God proved fragile. Control vanished. The tower, a symbol of power, became merely an empty structure. Families began to leave. Groups went their separate ways. The dispersal, which had been rejected, was now happening without choice. "We need to leave," someone said. "Where to?" Another asked, receiving no answer. Nimrod watched everything in silence. What had taken years to build crumbled in a few hours. His dominion could not withstand the invisible touch of God. Human power fell without the noise of war. It fell in silence. It fell in chaos. It fell because its foundation was not heaven. The tower remained incomplete. Babel lost its center. The name they sought to exalt began to dissolve among different languages. And while the people scattered, while the system crumbled before everyone's eyes, one question remained alive, heavy and unsettling, echoing behind everything that had happened. And Nimrod, what was he really trying to do? The question did not go unanswered for long. Ruins of Babel, they spoke for themselves. What was once noise, order, and ambition was now silence, scattered stones, and empty paths. The tower remained unfinished, a warning to all generations. Nimrod was there, not as a king, not as a leader, just as a man facing the failure of his own system. The people had scattered, the leaders had left, the dominion had vanished. He observed the fallen stones, the interrupted levels of the tower, and understood something he had never admitted aloud. "It wasn't just confusion," he murmured. "It was a trial." The secret was beginning to be revealed. Nimrod never just wanted to protect his people. He never just wanted to prevent another flood. What he tried to build was much bigger and much more dangerous. He tried to interrupt God's plan. From the beginning, God had promised redemption to humanity, a lineage, a future, a Messiah who would come in due time. For this to happen, men needed to spread out, form nations, and fulfill God's purpose. But Nimrod tried to stop it, an organized world where man would not need heaven, where there would be no waiting, promises, or dependence, where everything would be controlled down here. The tower was not a ladder to climb to heaven. It was a throne to rule the earth. If they stay here, he used to say, nothing will separate them. If they stay united, they won't have to wait for anyone. That was the real challenge. Nimrod didn't want to ascend to God. He wanted who replaced it. The system he created carried a new spirit in history. The idea that man can take the place of the Creator, that he can govern without submission, that he can decide the future without divine promise. It was first Antichrist's spirit, not one man against Christ, who does not yet exist, but a system against the messianic plan. That is why God acted. That is why Babel fell. That's why the unity was broken. It wasn't just a confusion of languages. It was the preservation of the eternal plan. It echoes to this day, crossing generations, reaching us as a silent and eternal warning. The spirit of Nimrod. Did he really die? The ruins remained. The tower was never completed. People scattered across the land. But the story of Babel did not end there. It merely changed form. Nimrod was the first man to attempt to rule without God. Not with swords, not with direct violence, but with a system. He showed that it's possible to push God away without denying his existence. You just have to make him unnecessary. You just have to put human control at the center. You just have to trade dependence for apparent security. That is what we learned from Nimrod. Babel was not just an ancient city. It was a role model, a mindset, a way of thinking, a place where man says, "I'll handle it. I'm in control. I decide." And that thought did not die with the stones of the tower. Today, Babel still exists. She appears in governments who believe they can organize the world without God. In religions that replace the spirit with rules and structures. In systems they promise security, but demand blind obedience. And often in human hearts who no longer pray, no longer hope, no longer trust. Whenever man tries to take the place of God, Babel rises up again. God did not destroy Babel out of fear of man. He destroyed in order to preserve his plan. The plan of redemption, the Messiah's plan, the plan to restore what was lost in Eden. This plan was never destroyed. It was never late. He was never defeated. But it always has been and always will be confronted. The story of Nimrod invites us to look inward and ask a simple yet profound question. In whom have we placed our trust? In the sky or in the towers we build? Because every time man chooses to control instead of trust, Babel begins to echo again, and God continues to watch. If this story resonated with you, 2 videos will appear on your screen with biblical accounts of people who also had to choose between trusting God or following their own path. Click subscribe to the channel and leave a like. May the God who stopped Babel continue to guide your steps today. Because whenever mind tries to govern without God, the echo of Nimrod sounds.